How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Kevin Schnieders, the CEO and Chief Servant Leader of Educational Data Systems, or EDSI. In the previous episode, Kevin and I talked about how he came into the leadership at his company and how he ultimately introduced intentional systems of culture right into the company. Now, Kevin's going to fill in some of the details of those culture building experiences. And we also get into the idea of servant leadership and this really interesting award that they won from Crane's Detroit business called Cool Places to Work. So this whole idea that you and I both learned from the Ritz-Carlton of the repetition of these things is what to me is so fascinating. And in retrospect, probably for both you and me, it seems so darn obvious. Like anything that we want to learn, you do it a lot of times and you get better at it and you start to internalize it, which is such an obvious thing. And yet most organizations don't do that. So when you began the structure after having learned from Ritz-Carlton, as I did, of your 12 daily behaviors that you're doing on a weekly basis, when you first rolled that out, what was the first thing did you have the idea of the videos first, or what did you do first when you said, all right, we're going to roll this out to everybody and here's what we're going to do every week for the next 12 weeks and cycle it? What was the first thing you did and how did people respond to that?
Yeah, I think, going back, I wrote them. So I did have that architecture moment again. And then I went to we've again been very, very lucky. Our chief talent officer, David, Arlene Jones, has been with me for 28 years. Wow. So we grew up together. Literally, we grew up together. And so I went to her first and I said, hey, I think I had written 42. Initially. And I kind of thought that was too many and just asked her. One of them was, I care enough about you to tell you have toilet paper on your shoe. And she's like, well, maybe a little bit too goofy. So she helped me to refine them, to edit them, as you said earlier, and got her input on that. Fortunate enough, again, to have the training that she and I both attended together from the Ritz-Carlton. So I knew about the cadence. That was the first thing that I did. But I did it just here in our Dearborn office, in Michigan. I wasn't bringing that out to what were then probably about 16 offices at that time, and maybe didn't even have the technology, at that time to do that. So yeah, you're telling those leaders, you're kind of sending them an email and saying, hey, this is what I said today in my huddle on Monday morning, or huddle. I'd like you to say something similar in your words or read this if you're not comfortable. And that now it's just so much easier, right? The technology has helped us to scale it, and that's been really, really fun. And so, yeah, that video goes out to 900 people. It's funny because we don't get 900 views, right? And we're able to track that today. I just told our marketing director yesterday, we were at lunch, and I said, hey, I told Casey, I said, I like to think that, they're watching it in groups, because I hear that a lot too. They do. That is absolutely a practice that some offices do. They'll play the video together. So, yeah, I like to lay my head down at night thinking they're all doing that.
And so what other things do you do to get them to? So at the beginning of the week, we've got on Mondays, the videos going out from you to everybody. What are other things you do around the 12 behaviors?
It's in every letter that I write, handwritten letters. So when we gave these moments of gratitude, they have to come to me still. And some of our leaders give me a hard time about that. They'll call and ask for like 20 coins. And I'm like, no. So they come to me because I want people to know that their story reached me. And I'm aware that they're special and they're doing something special. And so I take out a card and I write a handwritten note, but I'm always referencing specifically if they're not in their message to me, they're saying one of those daily ways. So I'm mentioning to them, which one of the daily ways are you living? In every email correspondence, hey, thank you. I'm trying to pick one out specifically that they're doing and be very intentional with behavior to make it very specific. And so, yeah, it's just so ingrained at this point, David, that you see it in some very basic practices that we repeat, like the coins. You also hear people talking about it in basic conversations, which is so much fun because we have been at this now for nearly 20 years. And you just find that it's ingrained. What we're trying to do now, and we'll have different levels of success initially, but we're trying to take it, we share spaces with our customer. So we're in these big government offices and we share maybe a corner And sometimes that's hard because there's a clash and you're trying to bring all these different cultures together. And so I thought in a moment of quiet reflection, it's like, why is it that we think we're different and we're special and EDSI is a great company? It's because of our culture and how we treat one another and how we live these daily ways. And so why not invite them to our training? Why not have them use our AccuMax, predictive index stuff? And why not do that? And so we're just inviting them all in and they're coming in different ways and showing up in different ways. But that would be really fun, is to grow that culture to other organizations in a very, not in a way to be boastful, but in a way to say, hey, this is special to us and meaningful to us. And we feel like we're better humans living this way. Would you join us? And so it's really been fun to invite them in and try to grow what we're doing with other organizations that maybe aren't experiencing the joy that we get to feel.
Well, and I think your idea there of inviting them in versus requiring them is probably the way to do it. And if they want to do it, great. And more of them probably will, than versus it being a dictatorial kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't have any authority. Even if I did, I wouldn't. Right? Yeah. It's so funny when we have a new leader and I do the training, I always say, congratulations, you now have less power than you've ever had, because we practice servant leadership and you're going to show up for these people in a way that it's not through authority, it's through caring, love, and relationship. And so I hope that you showed up and your motivation is through caring, love, and relationship for another human being.
So let's talk more about that servant leadership. You call yourself the chief servant leader. Talk more about, that obviously you're very intentional about using that language. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I put it on my business card like 2015, I think, David, because my good friend Stanley Fong, that I met in graduate school, brilliant Stanford engineer, and I was so impressed by Stanley. And he said, you keep calling yourself the chief servant leader. Why don't you put it on your business card? And I started putting it on my email signature, and people really responded to it well. And so I was a little bit nervous at first, and it was great. I'll tell you a quick story. I was speaking to my high school, which is a nervous event if you've not done that. And I had about 400 kids in an auditorium, and I got done, and the principal at the time was a former classmate of mine. And he said, hey, Kevin's one of the few leaders I know that talks about values, but he lives those values and he builds them into the culture of his organization. And he comes off the dais and sits, talks to me. And I said, hey, that was a gift, Damien. Thank you very much. And being a former high school buddy, he said, relax. It's a pretty simple servant leader model. And so I had not heard the term before that.
Oh, really?
20 years ago. And I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. So I said, how can I learn more? And he gave me a book, and I started to study and to practice. And if I have a chance to talk to people about it today, David, I use the acronym NAQ. And I ask them if they think they have the knack to be a servant leader. And I know, being a former English teacher, I know that's not how you spell knack. But NAQ, you meet the needs of the people that you serve. Do you just show up to help them be great? Do you hold them accountable? Because once you do give them everything to be great, they're going to hold themselves accountable. That's the secret, more than you ever could. But you have to keep score. Our accountability at EDSI is just keep great score, help them to get what they need to win and be successful. And then do you ask great questions? The worst question is often better than the best statement. So just in my marriage, in my relationship, stay in question mode is the thing that I'm often reminding myself. Stay in question mode. Ask 2 more questions. You'll realize that you don't know what you're talking about. Prepare to be wrong if you make a lot of statements. And so, for our leaders, we're living that by having the knack to be great servant leaders and, just meet people's needs, show up, facilitate great conversations. We're not where we want to be, guys. We need to be here. Get them together. Put a value stream map on the board. Figure it out, but don't figure it out because you're dictating to them, what to do, because they're not going to grow and they're not going to learn. So it's been such a powerful force. I know that it was who I was before I knew what to call it. And so it became very natural. And then it gave me something to talk about, though, with people that they could anchor on and then learn to do more of that themselves. I just had a person that wasn't doing that in a group meeting. We had 12 of our regional leaders. And I came in the next morning, I really struggled with some of the statements he was making. It was way too negative. It was from a place of being a victim. And he could have picked up the phone at any point in that 6-month experience and asked for help. That's the culture of EDSI. So I sent him a 2-minute video. And I said, hey, I would never say anything in front of 11 of your peers. And I'm not trying to correct you. If you think I'm trying to correct you, right, I said in the email, click on the video link. But if you want to learn how to be a better servant leader, if you want to grow in the way a servant would, it was basically just saying all you had to do was rephrase that as a question. Is there an opportunity is this crystallized, or is there an opportunity to bring in local perspective where I could really grow? And the person that designed this this program would have said, absolutely, that's our only intention. That's what we want to do. So if you come from a place of asking and real curiosity, you're not going to have a lot of conflict. You really don't. I have so little conflict with our customers, with our shareholders, with our stakeholders, with anybody, with my friends, with my family, because I'm coming from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
I just want to be patient, kind, and curious. And I say that to myself every morning when I wake up. What do I have to give to the world today? I want to be patient, kind, and curious. And what do I want our leaders to be today? Patient, kind, and curious. And so, that's all I was trying to do, is a soft correction for him to not say you're wrong, but to say it could have been so much more generative. And look, people did not respect. I could tell from looking at the Zoom screen or the Teams screen, they did not respect the thing. And so I have a responsibility to send him that video.
And that's an interesting point that you're making, and the way you just said that you have a responsibility to send him, and that's part of accountability. Is you saw something there that wasn't consistent with what you want and what would serve him best, and you're not doing your job as a servant leader, to use your language, if you allow that to go on and don't offer the insights that you have to help him.
Yeah, I don't know more than he does. Nothing to me in my life, David, is good or bad. It's just what's the fit. And for organizations, your leader's behavior has to fit the culture of your organization. Doesn't mean he wouldn't be a great leader someplace else. But if he's going to be a great leader here, it has to come from a servant's heart with a love for people. And we work really hard to try to identify that. And I think he absolutely will be that person. But that wasn't a good representation of that. What was great about it, and I told him that in the video, is that he wasn't saying that at the water cooler with a couple other leaders. He was saying that because he knew I wanted to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's just how he said it. Like any good grandmother would have told any of us, right? Is how you say it, not what you say.
So as you go back and think about the things you've done, I appreciate everything you've said, but in particular, your attitude about growth and learning, and that everything is iterative and we're just constantly evolving and trying to figure things out as we go. What were some of the biggest mistakes you made along the way as it relates to building your culture?
How much time do we have today? A lot longer list. I think not being impeccable with my language is one that, it's being a listener. Being a certified coach, taking training as a coach did not come naturally to me. What came naturally as a good Irishman was the gift to tell stories. And it took me a little bit of maturity, probably when my brain fully formed when I was about 26, to say I want to be more interested than interesting. And so the mistakes I made early on in my career were not shedding enough of that soon enough. And look, nepotism is a real thing. You get to be a leader at 23, right? A lot of people don't get to be leaders at 23. So you have this amazing trust with your father. He puts you in positions that you can succeed in because he knows you better than anybody else. And you do, right? As you did, David, you grow it and you learn. But I wasn't careful enough with my language. I just spoke too much. I spoke too freely. And that hurts people sometimes. And so I look back with great regret in learning, right? I learned from that regret. So I use it as it's a gift. But I don't love that people's, my relationship with people that left the company, were hurt because I was just too careless with my language. It was never, you know me well enough, David, to know, as one of my mentors said, just be an a-hole sometimes because you could never be an a-hole. People will say, like, you have resting kind face. There's really something that helps you. No, I'm not that. But it wasn't what they thought I represented myself to be. So I do believe that people who are successful, their identity, what they hold patient, kind, and curious, if you were to tell me right now, hey, Kevin, you weren't very patient with me, that would just cripple me for a moment, right? Because that's my identity. I want my reputation to match my identity. So I pay careful attention to what people tell me. Again, one of my mentors said, write it down. You're not paying attention to what people are telling you. Over the next 2 weeks, I want you to pay attention to everything. Like, people don't talk about me. Who's talking about me? No, they're telling you directly. And so I have a list every year that I redo every year because it got too long to put in my iPhone of what people say about me in a positive way. And that sounds awful to say it that way. But it's like, hey, they say in an email, thank you. That helped me to do this. You were really this. And so I copy paste, I put it in my file. And at the end of every year, I highlight the words, the adjectives that they used. are they reflective of someone who is patient, kind, and curious? Is my brand my identity? And so he helped me to understand that if you're not paying attention, you hear and hold the negative things because of the negative bias of the brain, but you're not paying attention to the positive things. They just gloss right over. Oh yeah, today's Friday. That's what I'm supposed to do. Right. And so as a person that was not giving myself enough self-compassion, I needed to hear what people were telling me. I needed to codify it, keep a list. And, it's been a really powerful thing for me. So that was a long answer, but I have a lot of regrets, and I've learned from every single one of them, and it's made me a better person and a better leader.
When you talk about learning from those experiences, one of my sort of pet peeves, I have lots of them, but one of them is that there's this whole stuff that I hear from so many organizations about failing forward and being, asking people to be comfortable with failure and all that. And I just have this different way of thinking about it, that I say that in my language, I say that successful people never fail. They don't see it as failure. They just have experiences, and we learn from all of those experiences. And some of them work the way we thought they would work, and that's great. And we learn from that. And some of them don't work the way we thought. We learn from those too, but we don't necessarily categorize them as I failed. It's not that. It's just learning. It's just having experiences and reflecting upon those experiences. And I think one of my observations is, you are very reflective, as am I, that we have experiences and then we think about, that's interesting. What did I learn there? What does that tell me, about people, about things, about organizations, so that you get some wisdom from that? And it's interesting to me that a lot of people seem to have experiences and they don't reflect upon them. They don't think about them. And it's hard to get wisdom if you don't reflect.
They move so quickly too, right, David? They're saying, hey, I need to be successful. I need to keep charging forward. And I think I've been lucky enough to be exposed to good learning, but that concept of double loop learning, right? Where you put stuff out in the world and then you get feedback about what you just put out in the world, and you use that as a reflective space to make that better. And, Nelson Mandela said, right, I've never lost. I've only won or I've learned. Yeah. And I think that's something that really resonates with me, and growth and learning. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just that curiosity, right? That you can be inquisitive. And today's a new day that I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. Yeah. Because I'm going to learn from those mistakes to try to continue to grow.
So I'm curious. I mean, I'm always fascinated by different people and how they think and where that comes from. And so I'm curious, you said you have 2 siblings, right?
Yeah.
A brother and a sister?
Yeah.
Are they like you in the way that they think, or are they very different?
So I mentioned I love my brother and I love my sister, and for most of my life until I got married, my brother was my best friend. We shared a bedroom for 14 years. He's 4 years older, so that helps. I'm raising 2 girls that are 3 years apart. I think the closer in age, sometimes the more competitive, the harder it can be. So my younger sister is 5 years my junior, and she thought the sun rose and set on my command until she was about 18. And so we had these great relationships with very little conflict, almost too much, right? I would have liked a little bit more constructive conflict. But you asked a question I want to pay homage to, David, which, are they like me? Quick, funny story. So we use this tool called AccuMax, and there's 350 of them. We had used a lot before that, but AccuMax has been great for us. And so my brother, who was not really on board with it, I said, hey, I'd done it with my dad already. And I took the profile to the trainer and I showed him my dad's profile without telling him it was my dad. And he was retired at this point. I saw a lot of conflict in his profile because of the retirement. And I said, tell me about this person. And they said, this is a person who is highest A, which in that language meant he needs his own way. He needs his own. And he wants enough information to prove that he's right. And that makes my dad sound negative. It's not meant to be. It's just who he's hardwired to be. And so I'm like, oh, geez. And he goes, and he will tweak your best ideas. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, if I would have had this 13 years ago, that would have saved so much conflict. And so I had him take it. He was the highest need my own way we had ever recorded until I tested my brother. And my brother selected 8 words, right? You can select up 80 words. He selected 8 because he's like, this is nonsense. Then when I went over the profile with him, he's like, oh, he's really getting it. He's owning it. His self-awareness is growing. He's like, yeah, I totally get it. And then I said, hey, guess what? I said, Dad was the highest A we've ever recorded until you.
Wow.
He goes, that's bull crap. There's no way I need my own way more than his. But my sister won't take it. So are they like
That's
me?
funny.
No, they very much need their own way. My mother and I have the identical profile. So you could put ours on a light board and it would be the same. She is my twin in many ways. We're very accommodating. We love people. And so they're not bad. I'm not bad. You just got to know yourself, right? You got to be very self-aware. And so, no, your curiosity to answer that question with a long story is, we're nothing alike, but we love each other very much. And those tools and that learning have helped us to talk about that in a really healthy way. And that's what I value so much about it. And they're nice enough to put up with me as I like to talk to them about it.
That's great. You had, back to your company for a moment, you had not surprisingly, you've won lots of awards as a company, but, and I noticed that a number of best places to work, which certainly wouldn't be surprising, but you've won some coolest places to work. I've never heard of that before. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, good for Cranes, right? That's a different angle on that. Cranes publication, I don't know if they're in Philly too, for sure. But yeah, they just did a good job of taking a different perspective on it. And most of the people I went to high school with, I'm sure would be surprised that I'm a leader at the coolest place to work. But in that way, David, it's just, we looked at it and said, I like that. That's something we want to be associated with. Cranes does a fantastic job, has an amazing reach here. I know a lot of leaders that read it. So it's important for us to get that kind of third party designation. People fairly find that that's more objective. And so we do a lot of those awards just because we want to tell people about it, first and foremost, to share the cool stories about the things that we're doing, and then to broadcast that in a way that people can learn from it. We really want to, nothing's proprietary. All these ideas, I'm sure, the first time I said it's evolutionary, not revolutionary, and somebody's like, oh, I like that. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. And then I'm like on a full head for about 30 seconds until I searched it in my, database of all the articles and stuff that I have. And sure enough, it popped up. This is somebody else's article. So it all passes through us, as one of my friends, Rob Dubay, said. All this passes through us. So I want to share it. And those awards help give us a platform to share that with other people and other companies.
And so what do they look at? I mean, best places to work, they're typically surveys that ask very specific questions. What kinds of things are they asking in a coolest place to work survey?
Yeah, I think most of it, first of all, David, was like an outgrowth of how many ping pong tables do you have in your company?
That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah, they did a nice job, though, of pivoting and saying this is really about culture and how much are you engaging people. And so, it would be practices that they want to see referenced. Are you buying lunches for people as a group? And what does that mean? What impact does that have on your company? How much flexibility are you giving people within the work? So they're not, at this point, I think they've evolved to a place where they don't think that it means, that you have a lot of ping pong tables. Right. They're saying, are you a great culture? Are you really engaged with people? Do your people feel that way? Because again, people don't realize sometimes that all of these surveys go out to all 900 people. Yeah. If it's national, or a local one goes out to 50 or 60 people. So they're really having to give, responses that way. And to get the level of response that we get, that's what we measure. How many people filled it out? And we typically get around 85%, which is very high.
Yeah, very high. Yeah, that's awesome. So as you think about what's next, you mentioned that you're thinking about employee ownership, et cetera. What's next for your career?
Yeah, for me, and this is very specific, I guess, but I would love to coach and teach. And so if I could do that within the four walls of EDSI, this is the place that's been my home for 30 years. This is the place that I care about. I truly wear the blue. And, to me, David, I would love to coach our leaders into the future. So if I could travel around, our girls are going to be leaving us here. One in the fall. I'll try not to tear up. And then one, as a freshman. So my wife loves travel more than anything else. And I would love to kind of travel around with her and coach leaders, one-on-one and in small groups. And so that would be a gift that the organization would give to me to say that they would allow me to stick around and do that. That's what I see. I do coaching, right? After I was certified as a coach, I didn't change my career, but I made a commitment to coach 2 CEOs at one time. Not more than 2, but I would always coach 2, typically nonprofit, pro bono, just trying to show up for people. And so I do that in conversations once a month. with leaders around the country that I just happen to meet. Someone puts in front of me, and that's really fun too. So I think it'll be a combination of just coaching and teaching. I used to think it would be going back to high school and teaching high school, but I don't think they'd allow me to teach anything but business at this point. Which, I don't know that that's my calling today.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've obviously learned an awful lot about leadership, and it's certainly a place that you can exercise your gift and probably have the maximum contribution, because certainly as you are coaching other leaders, you're impacting the people that they are leading. So there's an expanded impact from you doing that kind of coaching.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, David.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I'm so impressed with the things that you're doing, the things that you've learned, and maybe most importantly, just your attitude about the way in which you go about it. You're doing some incredible things, and I really appreciate you sharing that with our audience, Kevin. Great to be with you.
I'm a huge fan of yours, David, as I've been able to express to you in the past, and thank you for helping me to grow and learn as a leader, and it's been great to be here with you. True honor.
Thank you. And that's it for this episode of Culture Architects with Kevin Schnieders, CEO and Chief Servant Leader of EDSI. Folks, if you've been enjoying our show, make sure you subscribe, and that way you'll automatically get my new episodes as soon as they come out. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love it if you left us a review, and that way more culture fans like you can discover the show. See you next time.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event, or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.